Welcome back to Financial Therapy. It's not just about the money. I'm personal financial planner, columnist, and financial therapist Rick Kahler. Research tells us that 90% of all financial decisions are made emotionally, not logically. For nearly 4 decades, I've been helping people make better money decisions. So what makes my financial worldview different from most financial experts? I blend the nuts and bolts of financial advice with the emotions that drive making them. Good money decisions are not just about the money. So let's get started with today's episode. Welcome back to another edition. I want to cover something that I haven't covered before in 3 years on the podcast that I could find. And that's the notion of doing what you love. I have to go back to, probably around 2000 when I first went to a 2-day workshop with George Kinder. And it was on the 7 stages of money maturity. And it was where, for me, the concepts of money, emotions, and spirituality came together. Prior to this, I would look at spirituality and money as being like 180 degrees apart, and that emotions were something to be avoided in making good financial decisions, of which I confused acting out on emotions and feeling emotions, assuming them to be one and the same. But it was somewhat of a life-changing 2 days, and a number of my peers were at this training. In fact, I think there were, maybe around 75 total financial planners. And a handful of us followed George Kinder to the desert, our words, where we did a 6-day training with him. And we formed some lifelong bonds, and later became, we termed ourselves the Pioneers. And that was a group of us made up of Elizabeth Chaton, Michael Smith, Troy Jones, Marcy Yeager, Gail Coleman, Rich Coleman, Dick Wagner, Elisa Bowie, and later on Guy Cumby and Dave Yeske joined us. I think I got everybody. And we met for, I would say the better part of 3 years, maybe 3 or 4 times a year at some location where we just would have a long weekend. We had no agenda, which drove me nuts originally, and just hung out with the question of what is this this thing of combining emotions with money. And we talked a lot, explored a lot, felt a lot. And it was during this time that we embraced the notion that in doing holistic planning, what has become known as financial life planning, which is really financial coaching, that we really wanted people's money to support meaning in life. Coming from Jacob Needleman, I've talked about him many times. He wrote the seminal book in 1994, Money and the Meaning of Life. And this was kind of a radical concept that our money was there to to support our quest for meaning. And part of having a life of meaning is really being engaged in what gives one meaning. And part of that would be doing work that really was aligned with our goals and our behaviors and our values. And so that all made a lot of sense to us. And I think it does on different levels to anybody listening to this. I mean, if you can do it, why not do work you love? Why not do work that it feels more like play than work? So that was not our only focus, but it was a huge part of our focus in working with clients, was helping them go through various exercises, money script exercises, the money egg, the money atom, values assessments, just a number of different things to really boil down and try to align someone, their work with their heartfelt desires and goals. I remember early on when I started teaching the 2-day workshop that George gave. I had someone aligned, and we went, or that was in the workshop, and we went through the 3 questions, which was really, I think, the biggest thing that George has given the world. And in the 3 questions, when we were reviewing them and their answers, this one particular lady, I remember, worked part-time about 20 hours a week for a charity. I think she volunteered. I'm not positive. She may have gotten some pay. But at the end of this exercise, I remember raising her hand and saying, you know, what is shocking to me when I look at all of what's important to me and in answering these questions, there's one thing that didn't show up anywhere. And I said, oh, what's that? She says, my volunteer job. It's nowhere to be found. And I saw her not too long after that, and she had told me, well, I quit my volunteer job because of that, because it was aligning with more of a should and a not. Now, that's kind of the goal of what we're at is what we're spending our time, our life energy on, really aligned with our values. So that was just a little over 20 years ago, maybe even closer to 25 years ago. And what I have since discovered, and not very willingly, that I guess you could say I've kind of entertained this, that it's harder to really do the job one loves than what we, as in the early pioneers, and I'll certainly speak for myself, had hoped. And the reality is, so often what feels like play to us, what we are passionate about, just doesn't carry much pay, if any. I remember my daughter, when we were talking about college and what she wanted to do when she grew up. She loved to write, loved to draw. And we were talking about careers in doing that and potential pay and the ease of entering the field and being successful. And I remember her saying, "Well, Dad, I think we need a plan B." And I mean, the quintessential example of this is acting, right? You know, and going to LA and working as a server, trying just to make ends meet in pursuing one's dream. So that's where reality starts to set in on this notion of how easily is what I'm passionate about transferable to something that will pay the bills. So I started entertaining this notion that maybe the two don't often align. And I read a newsletter by Jonathan Clemens and his humbledollar.com blog. And he wrote, and I quote, "Forget pursuing your passions in your 20s and 30s. Instead, you should spend those years pursuing dollars so you can spend your 40s and 50s doing what you love." And I had to admit there was some value to that. And if I just use myself as an example, I spent definitely my 20s and my 30s, and I would say much of my 40s, pursuing what I was really good at, which at that time was real estate, and really understanding the intricacies of real estate and what made a good investment and how to buy, how to sell, how to structure deals really creatively. And I can't say that I hated it. I did enjoy that. And while I was buying for my own account and my own investments, that in itself isn't going to pay the bills at all in the short term. I had to earn a living, which was actually selling real estate. And I loved as much about that as I hated. I was just right in the middle when I took assessments as to how much enjoyment I was getting out of that. Now, back in that day, the job that I was passionate about, that I loved, was financial planning, and specifically fee-only financial planning, which was aligned with my ideologies and philosophies. But it was more of a hobby because I started that from scratch. I didn't earn anything doing fee-only financial planning for the first, and I can't say anything, but let's just say it came woefully short of paying the bills for close to 20 years, I would say. So it was my real estate business that was floating the financial planning boat, so to speak. And during that time, I worked very hard. I acquired money that I invested wisely, and I saved wisely from doing real estate. So finally, I would say in my 40s, late 40s is when I gave that up and was able to shift 100% into what I loved, which was financial planning. So I have to admit that I really more followed Jonathan Clemens' outline of spending in your 20s and 30s, becoming good at something, and good at something where you can make money. And what kind of triggered this for me was yesterday I was listening to an interview. A fellow by the name of Galloway, who's a very frequent guest on the Michael Smerconish show Smerconish is on Sirius XM, channel 124. I think I've mentioned him once before in the podcast as being probably the most certifiable in the middle of the political spectrum road of any commentator out there. And that's by two services that rate how far left or how far right a person or a show, news show, leans. And this was not a political interview. I think it was an interview for his podcast where he reviews books. And Galloway has recently written a book called The Algebra of Wealth. And I will admit I have not, it's so new, I have not read the book, but I've listened to the interview. And it was fascinating. I sat in my car kind of taking notes once I had reached my designation because the interview was so interesting. And there was a number of things that spoke to me, and my intention is to get the book because there's some other things that I want to do a podcast on that he mentioned. But the one that grabbed my attention was his challenging of do what you love and the money will follow mantra that we embraced 25 years ago. And he said that he really believes it's more important to find and follow your talent, not your heart, when making career decisions. And he pointed out that market values talent and that it's this alignment that's more likely to lead to financial success. Well, we can't argue with what the marketplace values. And for example, the marketplace much more values something who is great at hitting a baseball than who is great at teaching our children. And if a person has a talent for hitting a baseball and a talent for teaching children, it's not even close which one is going to be the most financially impactful. Now, if a person loves both equally, then the decision is a no-brainer. But if you're really great at baseball or maybe feel like I did about selling real estate, kind of, I like as much as I don't like as much about it, but you're really passionate about teaching, this can be quite a dilemma. Because in one, it's like, well, I've got an opportunity to make millions of dollars. I'm not necessarily going to be enthralled with it. It's okay. I'm good at it. That's my talent. But what I really love is teaching kids. And here's where this reality really the rubber meets the road, so to speak. Because if I can endure making millions for 5, 10, 15, or 20 years, and then doing what I love, which would be teaching children, and then maybe even teaching children in a capacity where I don't even get paid, that is probably the financial win-win. And he also said something that kind of stung. He said, most of the people who advocate following your passion are already wealthy. And this really skews their perspective. Oh man. And I had to admit, when I looked back at those of us that were preaching, follow your passion, do what you love, we were embodying that. We were following our passion. We were doing what we love. Now, were we already wealthy? Well, that's somewhat subjective, isn't it? I can assuredly say that a few were not wealthy. They had a good income, but depends what we measure wealth by. Is it income or net worth? And as far as income goes, by the Gallup definition of rich, we were all rich. I think back in that day is earning $100,000 a year or more. By and large, I would say we were all in the top 10% of net worth of Americans. Now, what does that mean to be in the top 10% of that time? I think it probably meant you needed to have over $100,000 or $500,000 of net worth. We would all say that was not wealthy. But the point being, Galloway was saying the folks preaching this typically have obtained it and are somewhat skewed. And I have to say that was true, especially for the fact that I was in my 40s. I had already done the job that I didn't like to do so much that where I built wealth. So that was a little embarrassing internally for me to admit that. So if we take that the statement of do what you love and the money will follow, an appealing belief, but let's be real, that's a money script. And like all money scripts, it's a half-truth. It works in certain circumstances and fails miserably in others. So as I was pondering this, and I did write a column on this a couple months ago, I see that the phenomena has played out in my finances again. For example, for the past 15 years, my passion has been advancing the field of financial therapy. I was a co-founder of the Financial Therapy Association. I was the co-founder of the Financial Integration Workshop, or Healing Money Issues Workshop, that we started back in around 2007 or so. I have invested a lot of time and money in developing workshops, programs, written materials. In the last 5 years or so, I've invested a lot of time, especially during the pandemic, of learning skills in internal family systems therapy that I have applied to financial therapy. And all of this has been really exciting. It's really juiced me. And it's probably been one of the more exciting times of my financial career. And I think more so recently, just witnessing the financial transformations in my financial therapy clients' financial behaviors, and just seeing the exponential growth in them and growth in this field in general. However, if I had to rely solely on the income from this endeavor, my net worth would be much lower. I had originally written I'd probably be bankrupt, and I don't know that that would be true, but it's possible my retirement would not be as assured as it may be today because my expenses far exceeded any income from doing financial therapy. So as you know, I have two firms, a financial planning firm and a financial therapy firm. And my primary job, my primary occupation is as a financial life planner. Just like my primary occupation was in real estate when I was building the dream of being a financial planner. Now the foundation that's bringing in the income is financial life planning that supports the passion of financial therapy and combining IFS with financial therapy and I want to say playing because that's often what it's felt like, just with developing that. So, I mean, the good news is that the skills that I've gained in learning financial therapy have benefited my financial life planning clients. It's improved my financial planning practice. So that it hasn't been a loss necessarily, because the most important thing in financial planning, financial life planning is the relationship and the relationship skills of the planners in really being able to deeply listen to their clients and be an agent of change, facilitate financial health. The point being, if I was just doing financial therapy, it would not support my lifestyle. And sadly, this field is starting to have been around long enough to where we can start to see some of the maturity in this field. And I just want to say that nobody's building a lot of wealth being a financial therapist. It's still really a discipline of passion, more than a discipline of making a really nice living. And this is true of therapy in general, although many of my financial therapy clients have been therapists, and most of them have made a very nice living. So I don't want to say that it's not possible. But financial therapy is still a new niche. And I just know that if that's all I was doing, I had better have another income to support that. So all of this underscores my main point is we need to balance our play with our pay. And I'm going to close with this one story. I once attended a conference where a speaker shared how her life was changed when her fiance was murdered in front of her, and she was in her 20s. And this horrible tragedy led her to work with grieving individuals. And she delivered one of the best presentations on grief that I have ever heard. Afterwards, she was sitting beside me, and I just praised her talk. And I asked her, "Where do you practice?" And she replied, "Well, Rick, I'm not a therapist. I'm a portfolio manager." Her passion was helping those in grief, but her lucrative day job involved managing hundreds of millions of dollars. And she told me she hoped to eventually quit and follow her passion full time, though she really felt conflicted about this because it went against the common advice of the community that we were in, which was pursuing what you love. And I told her, I heard these words come out of my mouth, there's nothing wrong with doing what you don't like, so someday you can afford to do what you love. She was so surprised and grateful and told me I really needed to hear that. And maybe you need to hear this too. I don't advocate staying in a soul-crushing job, but sometimes an okay job that provides financial stability can enable you to pursue your passions outside of work. The key is finding a balance that meets both your financial and emotional needs. Thanks so much for joining me. Thanks for joining me, Rick Kahler, for another episode of Financial Therapy. It's not just about the money. This is where I combine the nuts and bolts of financial advice with the emotions that drive making them. Remember, every financial behavior, whether it appears illogical to you or others, makes perfect sense when we understand the underlying beliefs, feelings, and thoughts. Sign up for my weekly blog at financialawakenings.com. I hope you'll join me again for our next episode.